Hello, and welcome back to my channel, Talented Reads. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in February. So let's start off with some stats. In the month of February, I read a total of 20 books and a total of 6,049 pages. My average rating for the month was 3.6, and I read from a mixture of media. I had 1 audiobook, 6 ebooks, and 13 physical books. For star ratings, I had 1 5-star, 1 4.5 star, 6 4 stars, 3 3.5 stars, and 9 3-star books. I read 2 new releases, which are books that came out this year, 4 not-so-new releases, which were books that came out last year, 8 backlist books, which are books that came out 2020 or prior, and 6 ARCs, which are advanced reader copies for books coming out later this year. So let's get into all the books. The first stack of books, I'm going to do so at kind of a higher level. These are the books that I read for the horror challenge, and I have my February horror wrap-up video coming next week, so I think it'd be more appropriate to talk more in depth about these books in that video. But just to run through them, these books are The Grip of It by Jack Jims, 12 Nights at Rotterhouse by J.W. Otter, Remains by Andrew Cole, The Elementals by Michael McDowell, and The Graveyard Apartment by Mariko Teoki. Alright, so next let's talk about the 2 new releases. Both of these came out last month in January. Real Easy by Marie Wachowski is a mystery thriller about Samantha, who is an exotic dancer at the Lovely Lady strip club. There's a new girl at the club, and Samantha decides to take her under her wing and try to help her learn about dancing and just help her navigate the club and all the club rules. One night, the new girl needs a ride home, and Samantha offers to drive her, which she soon learns was a big mistake. So when Samantha disappears, the other girls at the club, along with the detectives, decide to try to uncover what happened. So this was an okay book for me. I thought that the setting of the strip club was a unique choice. I don't think I've ever read a book in that setting. I liked all of the characters well enough, and I thought the disappearance and mystery surrounding that was entirely believable. I think what I struggled with the most was the pacing. I think if you like more of a less intense thriller where the stakes don't quite seem so high, I think this would probably be a good fit. I will say that the book leans into that whodunit quite heavily. I think it's a little more obvious to figure out, but I think the book leads you there because I don't think it's about figuring out who committed the crime, but more about like how everyone else is coming to that conclusion. I will say I did watch an interview with the author, and she was herself an exotic dancer at one point, and this book was kind of like a nod to some of the things that she experienced. I mean, obviously not to the, killer extent that this book took it, but I thought it was kind of interesting that she leaned on her past a little bit kind of in writing this. So that was pretty interesting. So next is The Devil House by John Darnell. I I didn't like this one as much as I was hoping. So on the surface, this is about Cage, who is a true crime writer, and who was offered the chance to move into this house and write about what the locals call the Devil House. This house is notorious because some murders took place kind of under some mysterious circumstances. But the story that he intends to write ends up being quite the puzzle. This was just an okay read for me. There's a lot that goes into the book that I didn't expect after reading the synopsis. That takes you kind of back to the original story, and you're there kind of out as the murders happened, and then it kind of switches and flips to Cage writing about that later. I feel like the choice to place us there as it's happening kind of lessened the mysterious and eerie factor. I mean, you think about a house called the Devil House, and I mean, all this stuff starts coming to mind, right? But we really didn't get that creepy sense of it because the murder, like, we were kind of there for it rather than kind of with Cage as he's uncovering stuff as he's going along. And I think the different parts and different chapters and different point of views made it feel kind of disjointed and less cohesive. And I remember reading some of the parts kind of going like, why is this even in here? So I was kind of bummed about this because I really liked the cover of the book, was really intriguing. The synopsis is very something that's up my alley, but it just didn't quite meet the expectations that I had for it. So next, let's talk about the nonfiction I read this month, which was Gory Details: Adventures from the Dark Side of Science by Erica Engelhap. Erica is a science reporter who investigates the gross, strange, morbid, and the taboo elements of our bodies and nature. So the book is divided into 6 parts, and each part has multiple essays on a topic that kind of ties into the main subject of that part. So first, I would like us to appreciate the cover because it's amazing. And then I want to actually showcase the different parts here because I just loved the illustrations that the book had. So part 1 is Morbid Curiosity. And my favorite essay from this section was Will My Pet Eat Me If I Died? Which, come on, let's be honest, is something all of us have wondered or even heard about at some point in our lives. Part 2 is That's Disgusting. And my favorite essay from this section was Sniffing Out Sickness, which I'm sure you can imagine what this essay was about by the title. But this was so interesting to me. And I know there's a lot of studies kind of going on about it. So it's something I think I would actually like to read into more because it was just so fascinating. Part 3 is Breaking Taboos, and my favorite essay was One Giant Leap for Womankind, which talks about this kind of social and cultural movements on menstruation, which I didn't even realize was a thing until I was reading the book. It was pretty interesting. Part 4 is Creepy Crawlies, which is, without a doubt, the section I struggled to get through. But my favorite essay in this section was Roaches Debunked. I never thought I would find cockroaches so fascinating. Part 5 is Gross Anatomy, and my favorite essay was The Need to Bleed, which talks about the history of bloodletting as a cure. which a lot of, cultures and even people to this day kind of talk about. And the last part is Mysterious Minds, which was my favorite part. I think I read out of all of them. And my favorite essay was Back Off, Bozo, which actually discusses the science behind the fear of clowns. So all in all, I really enjoyed this book, and I learned a lot. Some stuff, I kind of have heard about before, but it kind of took a different approach to it. And I loved Erica's simple approach to kind of discussing these things, and her belief that we should be more comfortable talking about gross things, because it's just a way to appreciate the beauty of the world and the science behind nature. I would certainly recommend this for everybody if you're interested. However, I think if you're at all squeamish or maybe vomit easily, maybe don't pick this one up. So, moving on, February was Black History Month, and another YouTuber, Bow Ties and Books, hosted Blackathon. So I decided to read for the thriller horror team, and I read 2 books. First was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. So I'm going to read straight from the synopsis because I think it covers this well, and I don't want to give anything extra away. So 26-year-old editorial assistant Nella Rogers is tired of being the only Black employee at Wagner Books. Fed up with the isolation and macroaggressions, she's thrilled when Harlem-born and bred Hazel starts working in the cubicle beside hers. They've only just started comparing natural hair regimens, though, when a string of uncomfortable events elevates Hazel to office darling, and Nella is left in the dust. Then the notes begin to appear on Nella's desk. Leave Wagner now. Okay, so I was so intrigued with this synopsis, and I was really wanting those good thrillery vibes, but it just didn't quite get there. I thought the dynamic between Nella and Hazel was good, and I really enjoyed both of those characters. Well, I will say Nella seemed to kind of change throughout the book, which I guess you would kind of expect. I think she lost some of that spark and that spunk and that strength that she had in the beginning of the book, which was kind of a bummer for me. I appreciated the conversation about racism in the workplace, and the scenes are just as awkward to read as they are to experience them when it occurs in real life. Yeah. My challenge with this book is I think it took kind of a weird turn towards the end, and I was left with far too many questions. And while I don't mind kind of an open ending, it felt very confusing and lost kind of by the end. So this one was just okay. So the second read that I had was My Sister, the Serial Killer by Onyankan Braithwaite. Corday has been cleaning up after her sister Iola's accidents for years now. The most recent incident will be the third boyfriend Iola has claimed she killed in self-defense. Corday begins to question whether these were in fact accidents. Then the worst thing happens. Iola starts dating a coworker of Corday, someone who Corday has been in love with. This was just another okay read for me. It says this was a mystery thriller, but I think the book focused more on the sister dynamic and the strain on their relationship rather than the serial killer killing part. I didn't sense a lot of mystery with the narrative. And what really killed this for me was the ending. I felt like I was teased for this big grand ending, which just never quite happened. Okay, next we have You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, which is about Shay, who witnesses the death of someone who was a friend to the Moore sisters, Cassandra and Jane. Shay becomes entangled with them, and their friendship kind of grows from there. But Shay is soon to find out that the friendship is not as glamorous as she thought it was. So this is the third book by this duo that I've read, and I think it ranks about in the middle. I think the mystery was intriguing enough for me to keep reading. I was kind of interested to see where everything was going and like what the deal with the Moore sisters was. But oh man, I did not like any of the characters. Shay seemed to be this kind of big pretentious baby, and Cassandra and Jane were just flat for me. It took a while to feel like I understood the character actions and their motivations, which now that I know kind of how it ended, I guess I can see why it took that long, but it was still a little annoying to kind of have to go through all that. There was one twist that did surprise me, and I did enjoy that reveal, so that's kind of why I bumped this a little higher than just a regular three star for me. Okay, so let's get into the ebooks. So first, I have to start with Tripping Arcadia by Kit Maquist. I did read this as an ARC on NetGalley that the publisher so kindly sent to me. This book came out this month, I want to say on the 22nd of February, and I loved it so much, I actually decided to purchase a physical copy. This cover is absolutely gorgeous, and it really does capture the narrative so well. Tripping Arcadia is about Lena, who is desperate for a job to help out her parents after her father is injured and is then laid off. She is offered a position as an assistant to a family doctor to care for Jonathan, who is the son of a very elite family. Lena uncovers that the family is responsible for her father's fate and decides to get revenge. I absolutely love this. It's my only 5-star read for the month. This book was a great mix of this kind of gothic atmosphere, kind of mixed with family drama, and then there's some pretty horrifying scenes in here. I think it covers hard topics like grief and suicide, but with ease, and it never felt like it was reaching out of place for kind of what was happening. And what was kind of unique about this is you find a part of yourself in almost all of the characters. You understand the anger that Lena has, you understand, what Jonathan's going through, and you understand, what Audrey's going through, and it was just really unique in that aspect because a lot of the characters were so different, but kind of had these traits that you can relate to. I loved the botanical kind of undertone. I think it added so much to that mysterious kind of gothic atmosphere. This was a debut from Kit, and I hope he continues to write because I will without a doubt pick up anything he writes. I read this actually to join a Powell's author chat that was with Kit in conversation with Hannah Witten, who is the author of For the Wolf. So For the Wolf is the first book in a fantasy series which follows Red, whose purpose is to be sacrificed to the wolf in the wood in the hope he'll return the captured gods. But Red soon learns that legends lie. I think this was advertised as a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but I got more of like Red Riding Hood vibes. This was just okay for me. I thought the nature magic was pretty cool, but I really kind of hated this sacrificial portion to the narrative. It became too easy of an excuse for things, you know. It's like, why can't I do that? Well, because that's how it is. Well, why can't I save this person? Well, because that's how it is. It's like, then why are we here? So that was a little annoying, but there was this shifting point of view between Red and her sister. There is a second book coming out later this year. I think that's called For the Throne. So the whole lore of this world says that the first daughter is for the throne and the second daughter is for the wolf. So we know that Red is the second daughter, which is why the book is called For the Wolf. So my guess is the second book is about the first daughter, who is Red's sister. Will I continue in the series? Probably. We'll see. The next arc was Starfather by Charlie Holmberg. This is the second book in the Star Mother series. So I'm actually going to talk about Star Mother in addition to this, which I read this month because I wanted to read it before I read Starfather. But, you know, with Starfather being the second book, I don't want to give away any spoilers for the second book, so let's just talk about Star Mother. So when a star dies, a new one must be born. The sun god Sion asks the village of Endweaver to provide a mortal to be the Star Mother. So Sirius decides to volunteer to honor her family, but she ends up being the only mortal to survive the birth. So Sirius returns to Earth only to find that many years have passed. She befriends Rishdril, who kind of journey together to locate Sirius's relatives. Starfather, while it kind of occurs after the events of the first book, it's a story more about the sun god Sion himself. I think I liked Star Mother far better than Starfather. I think I liked Sirius's character better and the journey that she takes. You know, the romance, these are heavy on the romance. I think Charlie, a lot of her books do have an element of romance to them. But I think the romance between the gods and the mortals in the books was just okay. I think in the second book it felt kind of forced. But I did like the fantasy elements and the human kind of characteristics that Charlie brings to things like the stars and the sun and the moon and Mother Earth. That was really intriguing. So the next ebook I got was The Last Laugh by Mindy McGinnis, which is the second book in the Initial Insult duology. So I'm going to talk about the Initial Insult, which I also read in February because I wanted to read it before I read The Last Laugh. So I'm going to do this just like I did with Charlie Holmberg's books. I don't want to give much away for the second book. So the Initial Insult is about Tress, who lives with her grandfather on what the town calls the White Trash Zoo. She is poor and struggles to help keep the zoo well kept and, help bring in a little cash to her grandfather. Tress's mother and father disappeared 7 years ago, and Tress is determined to uncover what happened, and she knows exactly who's going to tell her. Felicity Tornado. At a Halloween costume party, Tress decides she will do everything in her power to get Felicity to give her the answers she needs. Okay, so the first book was just okay for me. I think, actually both books had a point of view from an animal that Tress kind of takes care of at the zoo, which I thought was a very interesting take, and I actually liked the point of view better in the second book than I did the first book. I see why those two animals were chosen, but I think the point of view itself added a little something to the narrative more in the second book than I think it did in the first book. The first book took me a while to kind of get into, but it ended so good, and I couldn't wait to pick up the second book. And the second book was so much better. I loved the kind of explosive end that happened, and I would say if you're struggling to get through the first book, just hang in there so that you can get to the second book, and trust me, you'll get rewarded. So, Hide by Kirsten White is my second favorite book that I read for this month. I'm going to read the synopsis because I think going into it with little information definitely made the book, I enjoyed it so much better with that. So, Hide is about a high-stakes hide-and-seek competition. The challenge is to spend a week hiding in an abandoned amusement park and don't get caught. 14 competitors, 7 days, everywhere to hide, but nowhere to run. This was great. I think the setting at the abandoned amusement park just really set it off. You can imagine being there, and I thought it brought a lot more of that game element to the narrative, since that's what you associate with, kind of amusement parks. I think the mystery of the competition and what the competitors were dealing with was great, and I think the little added monster element just really topped it off and made it utterly terrifying. I did read Kirsten's other novel, which is a young adult. I think this was her first adult horror, and I really hope she writes more. I really enjoyed it. So next book was Echo by Thomas Oldhovelt. Echo is about Nick, who wakes up in a hospital after a horrific mountain climbing expedition that went really bad. Nick's injuries are pretty substantial, and though he says he can't remember what happened on the trip, he remembers everything. So, for me, this book had me at a horror story set in the wintry slopes of a mountain, like, right up my alley. However, I felt like I got half of what I wanted. This was more about the aftermath of the climb rather than the climb itself, which is really what I was hoping for. We do get clips of the climb itself, and I just think the disorientation and hallucinations and kind of the pull of the mouth was far more interesting for me. But again, those chapters were so far and few in between. Sam, who is Nick's partner, was kind of a confusing character for me. It's kind of a contradiction throughout the whole book, and we got a lot of his turmoil, which I don't think really did anything for the narrative. The opening chapter of this book was creepy as hell, But this book was so long that it took a long time to come back around to that. So it lost a lot of that pull that it had upon the initial introduction to it. So, while this book did have some really creepy, scary parts, it just wasn't a slam dunk for me. And the last book I have to talk about is The Way of the Worm by Ramsey Campbell. This is the third book in the Three Births of Duluth series. So it's hard to talk about this one because it's so far into the series. But in the first book, The Searching Dead, which I actually read last year, we follow the narrative of Dominic Sheldrake and his tie to his teacher, Mr. Noble, who is a spiritualist, but drawn to something far darker. So each book takes place at a different point in Dominic's life, from childhood to adulthood. And it talks about his interactions at each of those points with Mr. Noble. Each book has been great, and The Way of the Worm was certainly no different. I was really excited to be back with Dominic, and I loved how the story unfolds. I think the books have kind of built on this darkness and this eeriness, and, all of Dominic's experiences are traumatizing, but feel so real. I'm actually kind of sad. I'm kind of at the end of these now. And I've read some other Ramsey Campbell books, but this series has certainly been a favorite read for me. I think, although these are coming out 2021 and then this third book in 2022, I think these are actually re-releases. But anyways, I'm really excited to pick up the third book. I'd like to have a copy of the whole series for my shelf, so I really enjoyed this one. All right. Whew, we made it to the end. So that's everything I read for the month of February. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite February read was, or if you're interested in checking any of these books out that I've read. Hope to see you in my next video. Bye.